All right, so break down this whole concept to me and what you're looking into right now, and I guess the mechanisms of how you're looking into it or how you're recording it, and then from there, why that's useful for hypertrophy.
Yeah, so there's always a question in hypertrophy training of, I suppose in any training, of am I doing the right thing? Like someone could see you doing leg press and you've done one rep so far and your feet are in a certain position on the platform. And they go, hey man, like, is that a good place to put your feet if you want to grow your quads? Like, you could tell them like nominally, you could say yes, because you think that. Then after doing that one rep, let's say you rack it, you think about it like, how am I so sure that my quads are getting hit better than other positions, for example? And then someone could ask you after a set of chest flies, like, hey, did that really hit your chest? Let's say they offered you a different grip to try. Like instead of holding dumbbells out here, you hold them like this or something. And they're like, what do you think, better for your chest? They expect an answer that you only had one set of information to collect. Turns out, maybe we can give them some kind of insight and thus ourselves as to whether or not that's a really good idea. Multiple sets. Someone puts you through a leg workout they have or a bicep workout. Let's say 5 sets of a certain exercise or 3 sets of one, 3 sets of another. At the tail end or midway through, they could be like, what do you think, man? Hitting up your biceps? To what degree are you comfortable saying, yes, this is amazing? Or, yeah, it feels pretty good, I think. Or like, dude, this sucks, right? It's highly underwhelming because, I've been put through multiple workouts, or someone doesn't have to interact with you for this. It could just be just you. Like you design your own workout. Are you asking yourself at the end of every rep, set, multiple sets, am I really doing as good of a job as I could be, or a reasonably good job, or is there something lacking? Right. And then the time scale moves even further, between workouts, right? In a preview of what we'll be talking about just a little bit, like if you had trouble hitting your quads, like actually stimulating them through a bunch of movements, and you found a workout that the day later, your quads are physically sore for the first time in years, you should be pretty confident you did something, right? Whereas if you have, used to getting your quads pretty sore after workouts and someone's like, bro, try this crazy quad workout. And 2 days later, you feel nothing in your quads. Could you be growing more because you're not overdoing it anymore? Sure. But are you enhancing the stimulus? Probably not. Right. And then at the end of that rung is much later is between mesocycles. And this is the easy one, which we'll cover at the end, between mesocycles of training. So at the end of an entire mesocycle of training, are you, can you say you've grown muscle? And there are ways to do that. So the really cool thing is there's these multiple time scales all the way from a single repetition or even inside one repetition. I'll explain what I mean by that in a second, all the way out to a whole, mesocycle, which is like a month or two of training. And at various time points within that time scale, at various scales within, you can be checking boxes, basically like a check plus, check, or check minus system of am I doing a reasonably good job of stimulating muscle growth in the target muscles that I want? And if you check all the boxes with check pluses the entire time, you're at least on the stimulus side doing enough to grow muscle, whether or not your genetics have topped out already, or you're not eating enough protein, or you're never getting any sleep, or you're abusing methamphetamines and you're never going to grow any muscle. That may not be up to the stimulus, right? But at least on the stimulus side, you're doing a good job. And if you're not getting all the check marks where you should be, there's something left to be desired. And there are ways to make sure those check marks are hit more than that.
I love it. Yeah, I think the whole conversation of soreness and muscle damage is confusing for a lot of people because so much came out that not necessarily fear mongering, but like telling people to never go to failure. And
Sure.
I think that pushed people to get to not close enough to failure.
Sure.
And I've heard you say it multiple times too, like muscle damage is just, it's a proxy to let you know that you're probably growing or doing something. It's a good sign. It's part of the
At
process.
least doing enough. Maybe too much, but at least enough.
Yeah. So fill me in more about this exact thing. Are you guys doing a study? Are you just starting to record data for it? Like, how is this?
So I've been recording data in one capacity or another for a very, very long time. But this is more of a theoretical framework for how folks should think or can think about their training. And it can be really, really instructive. So if you'd like, I could just start going by each time scale and sort of describing how this process would work, what you're looking for. And at the end of each time scale, if you want to shoot me some questions or tell me keep going, does that sound okay?
Yeah, perfect. Let's do it.
Okay, super. So here we go. The first time scale is the repetition. okay, what could you possibly get out of one repetition as far as information? And here's what I mean. You sit on the leg press, you set up your stance, you do one rep, you go up and you go down, first down, you go down and then up. Okay. As soon as you've done one full rep, you now have some information that is going to indicate how much hypertrophy doing more reps like this in a program over the months is going to cause. What? That's nonsense, right? But hold on a second. Imagine that you do a rep. Your target is the quads. On the way down and on the way up, you feel a phenomenal amount of tension in your adductors and your hamstrings, not a thing in your quads. How confident are you that if you just robot locked yourself in and did more reps like that, that you're going to get huge quads, as big of quads as you could? What do you think, Cody? Would you be like, yeah, definitely?
Probably not. Probably not the best.
Probably not. Probably not. So our first indicator is the perception of tension in the target muscle. Imagine now you did one rep like that because it's a new leg press. Your gym got a new leg press or you're traveling somewhere. You don't know where to put your feet because you have no idea how the machine works, right? The specifics of it. You do one rep and you're like, nope, that's hamstrings and adductors. You take your feet and you put them down further and closer together and open up like this, and you do another rep. All of a sudden, there's a huge tension felt through your quads. Not only this, at the, well, I'll get, so huge tension felt in your quads. And you're like, okay, now this is targeting my quads. How much stimulus do you get out of one rep? Not much. But if I kept doing this, the amount of stimulus would summate in my quads and probably cause good hypertrophy. So right away, that first time scale of detecting tension in the target muscle is actionable, which is why you see bodybuilders switching their grips after doing a couple of reps, switching their stances after doing a couple of reps on a new machine, because like, nope, don't feel that in my lats. Nope, don't feel that in my forearms. Nope, don't feel that in my biceps, but I'm supposed to. So they switch their grips, they switch their positions, they switch the angle, and all of a sudden they're getting tension in the right part. Here's another consideration you get just from one rep, or certainly several reps. Are you getting through a full range of motion and feeling a deep stretch in your muscle at the bottom and a peak contraction at the top? If you're in the leg press, you might actually feel tension in your quads, but like the seat's tilted wrong or your feet are too weird on the platform and you're not able to do a full range with your quads. You're like, I definitely feel it in my quads, but I could do more range of motion. Now, all of a sudden, one rep later, you rack. Like, this is exactly what warm-ups are for, right? To get you to feel this whole process. Just one rep, you're like, okay, I'm going to stop because this feels all wrong. You take the what's it called, the seat in the back of the leg press, you lower it, and then you put your feet even lower on the platform. And all of a sudden, not only are you getting crazy tension through your quads, but you're able to stretch your quads fully under that tension at the bottom, which is hugely correlative for hypertrophy, and get a peak contraction at the top. And now you're like, wow, really? This rep, just one rep or two or three is all you need to figure out, okay, am I locked into the good technique that I want or not? This is a never-ending discovery process. Well, you'll adjust rep to rep. Like sometimes you dumbbell press, right? You're going up and down, and you start to get a little too close and bend your elbows in too much, and you're like, I felt that more in my triceps. And then you open up and flare your elbows. You're like, ooh, now that I feel in my pecs, right? This perception of tension in the target muscle, especially when a big stretch is involved, is a really good permanent guide. Every single repetition, it refreshes to tell you, okay, great, okay, great, okay, great, or okay, great, okay, now I don't know what you're doing, and now you're an idiot, and now you're just going to get hurt, right? So you've seen people, I'm sure, do squats for hypertrophy, sets of 10. Even if they start out with good technique, some people at the end of it are doing some kind of weird rebirth, good morning, satanic ritual. And you're like, man, do you really feel a ton of tension in your quads through that whole squat? And a lot of times, feeling tension in the quads is like, it's a little disturbing, right? Because not only are you not as strong as you could be, because if you used your back too, you could lift more weight, but also like feeling a ton of deep tension in your quads could be a different weird feeling for people not used to it. And so people end up beginning a squat set with all the right intentions. I'm going to feel this in my quads, and they have great technique to do that. And thus the quads produce the most tension and stimulate the most hypertrophy in themselves. But there's a temptation sometimes to get away from really hammering in the quads. And all of a sudden you're sort of trying to split the load between your quads and your glutes and your back. And then you get to still do more reps, but your quads are getting incrementally less and less work with every single rep. And that's not good. So not only does the ability to detect tension in the target muscle allow us to check the box of, okay, our technique is fundamentally sound at the beginning with this rep, Doing more and more reps lets us, over the course of multiple reps, say, okay, is this tension still going where I want it to go? And if it's yes, if it's not, then my technique has been slipping and I need to readjust it.
Is this like a good argument for, I mean, so there's a few things I actually wanted to ask you today. And one of them I heard you speaking on, I want to say it was Steve's podcast recently. You guys were talking about basically angling your feet and stuff like that for a squat. But there's a lot of people that will say it doesn't matter. Close stance, wide stance, toe straight, toes out. It doesn't matter. Like full range of motion, volumes, all that matters. Do you think there's an argument to chase a certain joint angle for more time under tension, more range of motion, like things like that, because it's just a signal? Or like, do you really think it does just come down to volume? And I think you're a good person to ask this because you were kind of like the volume guy, because you brought like the volume landmarks and that was such a staple in the industry. But you've been talking a lot lately about technique and form and execution, which I think is good because it reminds people that it's not just volume.
Sure. So I think the folks that say it's just volume and just do a full range of motion, they're like 90% correct and 10% wrong, which is a great start, but we could all do better than that, right? So they're 90% correct is like, look, if you're doing deep knee bends, right, which are what squats are originally called, with heavy weight and lots of reps, like biomechanically, you have to be using your quads to a large capacity. And thus, whether your feet are a little wider, a little narrower, as long as you're squatting deep, you're going to be getting great gains. Now, there are different ways of squatting deep. You could do low bar squat deep. You could do high bar squat deep. You could do slightly wider, slightly narrower. And that ends up targeting your quads a bit more or a bit less, your hamstrings a bit more or a bit less, your lower back, your glutes, and your adductors. And if you really want quad hypertrophy out of the squat, there is going to be a technique for you that hits the quads the most and everything else not as much. Provides the highest raw stimulus magnitude to your quads. So in that case, that for those particular foot positions that you were talking about, they do matter. Now they matter like 10%, not 90. 90% means you bend over with the bar on your back. That's it. But that 10% matters because, listen, if you're trying to get as much muscle as you can, especially in the context of fatigue, right? Because low bar squats grow your quads probably almost as much as high bar squats, except you pay like double the fatigue costs. So you can't do as many of them. And then over time, they don't grow your quads as much. So yes, there is absolutely something to making sure to place your feet in very particular positions, specifically with what's I've been describing as the stimulus to fatigue ratio. How much stimulus are you getting to your quads versus how much fatigue are you getting usually to the rest of your body, or how do your joints and connective tissues feel? If you do a squat and with wide stance, like someone shows you, and you're like, my knees hurt this way, and then you do it with close, and you're like, my knees feel great, that bad response would be like, it doesn't matter how your knees feel. Like, what, really? Like, so just going to keep squatting, my knees are going to hurt more and more and more, and then I'm just not going to be able to squat? Like, yeah, I don't know. I don't even know what they'd say, right? So I think the refutation, though, of the point, the really, really good point that people make when they say, look, it's just like full range of motion and foot position doesn't matter, is foot position probably even matters for which parts of the quads get development, but it matters such a tiny amount that, people will say, like, people have like these barely there legs that, like, if you put on a pair of jeans, people don't even know you have legs. And they'd be like, what angle should I be using for my feet on a hack squat? So shut the fuck up, dude. You need to squat, hack squat. But the better answer is you need to hack squat with whatever is comfortable and whatever you feel in your quads. And then when you're really, really big and your quads are worth perfecting, then you can start to worry about angles and stuff like that. And you can worry about during if you want, but just make sure you're at least executing that heavy basic range of motion over and over. And then the particulars matter very little.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think there's just a hierarchy, and then you breaking down that first stage of assessing every single rep, I think is helpful too, because before you start adding in even more into your training and advanced strategies and start really tampering with even increasing volume, you should probably figure out the fundamentals, do the full range, figure out your joint position that feels good for you.
Yes.
And then add
well, because that's a great point, Cody, because like, volume of what,
Yeah.
It's almost like saying, like, okay, the most important thing as a brew hall that we can do is put out beer, because people buy a lot of beer and they give us a lot of money for beer. Like, okay, what kind of beer? Like, it doesn't matter, just fill the kegs with whatever. Like, I feel like people won't buy a lot of it if it sucks. So maybe really work on your brew and really get a great beer together. And then when you have a great beer, then you can scale the volume, right? It's the same way with squats and stuff. It's like, Like if your squats are all dog shit, more volume is just going to get you more hurt knees and hips and torn adductors, and then good luck getting big quads that way. But if your squats are golden, man, each rep causes a lot of quad growth, not a whole lot of anything else, and then all of a sudden you're building, and then the volume actually counts for something really good.
Do you think this would apply for pre-fatiguing as well? And what I mean by that is, so pre-fatiguing was like really, really popular back in the day. It was like, I remember doing it all the time. And then there came this point where people were like, no, it's going to like destroy your performance and your volume's going to go down, so it's pointless. You've actually recently been talking about it again and made some really good points. But do you think that pre-fatiguing would be disadvantageous if you didn't understand your own positioning first? Because if
Oh
you
my God,
fatigue
absolutely.
your quads and then you go into a squat that sucks for you, you're still going to feel your quads and you think that it's a good squat, but it's not. Does that make sense?
For sure. Also, something worse could happen. You could start to squat away from your quads,
Mm.
like leaning back a ton, cutting depth, pushing your butt back, leaning forward, pushing your butt back, and all of a sudden widening your stance so that you pre-fatigued your quads doing leg extensions, which could have been a good thing in context. But now the way you're squatting is to try to get away from activating your quads. So what you should really do is be very diligent. If you're going to pre-fatigue your quads, I probably wouldn't do it with leg extensions. I would do it like leg presses or something. But let's say those leg extensions, once your quads are fairly fucked up, when you go to squats, squat as strictly as possible, what I call into your quads. Like literally make sure when you squat, the quads do this, your knees do that, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God. When you think to yourself, man, if I just leaned back a little or sat back, I could get more reps. Don't sit forward, go close to failure by really squeezing the fucking living juice out of your quads. And then you will get great quad hypertrophy. But if you use a pre-exhaust and then you try to squat away from your quads, you'll accomplish two things. One, you will lower the amount of weight you're squatting, and thus the overall stimulus of exercise is going to suck. And two, you're going to not really push your quads super hard on the squat. So the pre-exhausted more or less done.
I love it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Definitely good to, yeah, pre-exhausting is something that you should use when your technique and mind-muscle connection is really, really well established. And perceiving the tension in your muscle is a big part of mind-muscle connection. The second part of mind-muscle connection is what we can use in evaluating an entire set. And while rep to rep, we can perceive tension. For higher rep sets especially, you probably need a whole set to figure out what the target muscle really is relatively to others. For example, if you're using, a set of 5 to 10 reps, for the first rep, you can tell exactly what muscles are being activated. Like, okay, that's definitely my quads, right? But for higher rep stuff, like you do a lunge, someone like with your body weight, let's say you could do 30 lunges maximum before you fail, or like with, 50 pounds or something. Someone could be like, right, you do like one lunge. They're like, where do you feel that? You're like, I wouldn't say I feel that anywhere. Like it's a lunge. It's not that hard. Like when you walk, do you feel your legs? Like, no, I hope not, right? Like, shit's happening. I can't tell exactly what muscle. How can you tell exactly what muscle with higher reps? Well, what's being taxed to the limit is what's burning, right? So if you're doing a set of bicep curls with 20 reps, if your biceps are not on fire by the end, and if your forearms are on fire, man, is that really, are your biceps a really limiting factor? Because remember, the target muscle going close to failure is what causes the most growth. If your forearms are almost at failure, but your biceps technically are good for another 6 reps and you stop, you're doing 6 RIR training for your biceps. Now, for your bicep curl, you're doing, let's say, 0 RIR. Like you went to failure because your forearms couldn't do it anymore. But are you expecting that to grow your biceps? Well, do you normally expect your muscles to grow from 6 RIR? Not really. So you're going to say like, oh man, like I don't get a lot out of my curls using, like for biceps, like I just don't like curls. And somebody could be like, yes, that is exactly correct based on the fact that you're actually training your forearms. So then how do you experiment with technique and modalities of dumbbells versus barbells versus different grips? Well, you find one of those that towards the end of a 20 rep set, the burn is in your biceps. It is debilitating and it's just painful as shit. At the end of one of those sets, if someone comes up to you and be like, those don't train biceps, right? You could be like, that's nice. Wrong. How the hell am I accumulating a shitload of lactate in my biceps if I'm not using them, right? Like that would be insane. So we have the 1 rep time scale already covered with tension perception. Now we have the whole 1 set covered. And how do you tell if a set is hypertrophic? Well, if all the reps were tension in the right place for heavy, perfect. And if all of the reps summed up to the higher rep sets being, the burn is felt in the target muscle, then we know for higher rep sets that that's probably the target. Imagine doing a chest fly machine for the first time, new machine, and you're doing a high rep set close to failure for pecs. And at the end of this, when you go to failure, you get off the machine, someone's like, so we think great for your chest. You're like, okay, my front delts are on fire. My pecs, are you going to put your money in the jar that says this is a great chest exercise? Probably not, right? And physiologically, probably not, because your front delts probably just limited your ability, and then your chest was like, eh. And even if your chest feels pretty burned up towards the end, but your front delts burned the entire time, that means your chest sort of got in towards the end and sort of just pushed your front delts across the finish line. Your front delts got the majority of the work, right? So in that case, we can use one set is now instructive because we have the burn, tension perception, and the burn tells us one set is good to go. And the next time scale is multiple sets. So how do we tell for multiple sets? Well, one thing we can tell is the pump. Okay, if you are doing multiple sets of an exercise and it is not increasing the intracellular or the whatever, just the total volume of the muscle that you're training, you're not getting a pump. Is it possible that you're robustly stimulating hypertrophy? Yes, it's possible. Some muscles don't get pumped all that much. You can grow without a pump. But the pump has been mechanistically linked to hypertrophy, like actual cell swelling causes muscle growth, and it's probably related to the degree of disruption you're given. And there's also targeting features. So, for example, let's say you do 4 sets of some kind of incline press on a machine. You know, some machines are built weird. 4 sets later, your shoulders are pumped as shit. Your triceps are like huge, but your pecs are like meh. Are you going to go betting that it's a great chest stimulus? Like, I don't know, man. Like your chest just doesn't seem to be doing a whole lot because it would be pumped if it was. And there's another way to compare. So let's say you're comparing 2 exercises. They both give you a great pump in your biceps. One of them, it takes 2 sets for the pump to be like ridiculous, and one it takes 6. What's the better exercise on just stimulus? Man, I mean, we all have those exercises, right? Where like 2 of them are fucked up. Like, man, that's probably a good exercise, you know, versus like, have you ever used any machines, Cody, where you're like on the thing for like 15 minutes and someone's like, what is that training? You're like, to be honest, I have no idea. like some cable row setups. I'm like, I could just be at home, like smoking a cigarette, probably getting more hypertrophy than sitting on the stupid machine. And it's funny because a lot of these things we're talking about, the stimulus indicators, when you use a machine, sometimes you get the feeling that the people designing the machines just had no idea what lifting weights was all about. You ever been on a machine where you're like, who made this?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just terrible. It's like an engineer's worst nightmare should be someone looks at their work, uses it, and just goes, awful. Like, is you just hang your head in shame. So all of these indicators, pump included, can tell us both which exercises are maybe a little bit more hypertrophic than others on average, and also how do we change our technique from one to the other. Like if you point your hands one way on a bench and it gives you a crazy shoulder pump, you point your hands another way on a pressing machine and it gives you a big pec pump, then, you know, after a couple sets, then you have that. And notice we have multiple time courses or multiple time scales so far. You're using a new machine and you're trying to figure out how it works to get your chest the best as opposed to triceps or front delts. And you're playing with the grips. You can play with your grips rep to rep. You can play with your grips set to set now. And at every or with heavy weights and with light weights. And at every juncture, you can tell, okay, am I on the right track or not? Because if you're using a machine and it, you know, you perceive a ton of tension in your pecs and your pecs burn at higher rep ranges and your pecs get a super crazy pump, gee whiz, you know, you're probably onto something with that machine. Whereas if you are using the machine and despite all your best efforts, 5 sets later, you barely feel any tension in your pecs. There's no burn in your pecs at higher reps. Because sometimes you're like, man, maybe it's a loading issue, right? So you do 3 sets and you don't feel shit in your pecs. You're like, let me drop the weight and see if I can catch a pump or like see if I can feel a burn with lightweight. So you try that and it still doesn't do shit. And your front delts fire out. And then all of a sudden you're not even pumped. You're pumped in your front delts, not your chest. Yeah, you know, that machine, you've given it a due course and it might not be causing hypertrophy. If you fly completely blind, and here's a real big picture underlying point here of this whole talk. If you're flying completely blind and you're like, I am evidence-based, I evaluate only after results come in. It's nice. It's a good notion. You could do a mesocycle or 2 or 3 of a chest machine that biomechanically looks like it should be stimulating your pecs by ignoring the pump and saying it doesn't matter, by ignoring tension perception and saying it doesn't matter, by saying the burn has nothing to do with muscle growth. And at the end of the day, you may discover after 3 months of training that you barely grew any chest size, but you should have known that after 1 session, you could have been like, man, you know, I should be changing something. Does that make sense? Like we could be doing better than just waiting for months on it.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned a couple times just this idea of chasing a burn and chasing a pump and RIR and stuff like that. What is your recommendation to people? How do you break down RIR to people? Because sometimes we'll say, you know, like 1 to 2 RIR, 2 to 3 is like you're still in that stimulus range. But I think some people don't truly understand what that is. You know, like sometimes I'll even say like, hey, gun to your head RIR 2. Like it's like a, you know, like life or death squats, you have 2 reps. Or even if you watch some of the videos where you take people through like a full leg day or a full back day. And I can't remember the guy's name, but he's a beast, strongman, and
Joey, yeah.
he's just like smashed afterwards. Um,
Sure.
so do you like, where is that gauge when we're doing all this stuff and like making sure we're getting close enough to failure? Because I think that's part of being able to really activate and stimulate that muscle enough, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So actually I have a pretty decent answer to that. The truth of the matter is you won't really know where that is until you explore it. So there's no one trick I can give you that you're like, you've been training 2 week, like too easy your whole life. And here's this one trick to really just go all the way to 0 RIR and find out. Because what people will say sometimes is, beginners should do 0 RIR training just to feel what that's like. Maybe, or they just lying to themselves the entire time. Also, beginners should be learning good technique and not going super close to failure, because super close to failure technique breaks down. So let's say you're an intermediate lifter and now you're ready to push it. You don't think you're going to true close to failure like you should be. It's actually quite simple. What you do is, and I have a whole YouTube video on this coming out soon. Yeah, actually just came out today. I got to share it, I think. For the love of God, I hope I got the right text from my YouTube guy. So here's what you do. You start a mesocycle at, what your best guess of 3 RIR is, right? Like right around there. Okay. Let's say you did a chest press machine. We'll just keep it super simple. Chest press machine for 100 pounds. And you thought like 15 reps is all you could do. And you stopped at 12. And you thought, okay, I could probably do 3, but maybe no more. And maybe you're right and maybe you're wrong. So then you come back the next week to do the same machine. And you put 105 pounds on the selectorized stack. And your goal now is, because you want to progress through RIRs with every week of your meso, you want to do like a 2 to 3 RIR. And then the week after, you're going to do like a 1 to 2 RIR. And the week after that, you're going to do like a 1 to 0 RIR. And then the last week, let's say 5th week, you're going to do true 0 RIR. How do you know you're not bullshitting yourself? Well, look at this way. You put on 5 pounds out of the machine. You got 12 reps last time on the first set. If we're taking only 5 pounds putting in the machine, which is not that much, and we are doing 2 to 3 RIR as opposed to 3, let's say, just for ease of explanation, 2 RIR now. In what world would that be less than 12 reps? It wouldn't, because if you did, let's say, 11 reps, you're like, that was for sure 2 RIR. Like, really? You got weaker? Or just putting 5 more pounds on the bar cost you a whole fucking rep? No way. So let's say you do 105. You now walk into the gym with 105 on the bar, that chest press machine. Your minimum goal is 12. And if you feel a little cocky, you can do 1 or 2 more. You get to 12 for sure. And you, after 12, you sort of, just for a split second in your head, or even on the way, I'm sure you think during your reps, right, Cody? Like, you're like, okay, I'm still doing these and I know I have 3 more, right? So right around rep 12, you're like, okay, is this really 2 RIR or is it not? Because remember, it's a little bit more weight. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Let's say you get 13 reps. 13 is now your new standard. Next week, let's say you go to 1 RIR. It's at least 13. It's 110 pounds now, because you should be accumulating a little bit of strength just from neural adaptation alone. And even if you're accumulating no strength at all, just RIR drop 110 at 1 RIR should be like 13 reps. Even if 105 at 2 RIR was 12 reps, or it was also 13 reps, because just 1 RIR is 5 pounds. There's no way you drop 1 rep and it costs you like 20 pounds or something like that, right? So you have this sort of minimum standard that you've set for yourself, at least now 13 reps. So the next week you're doing 110, you get at least 13. And maybe you're lying to yourself, and that was really 5 RIR again. But that's cool because you're getting stronger, right? The next week, you're going to do 115 pounds, at least 13 reps. How long, and my question is, let's say, okay, you finish and you're like, well, that was my last week of deload or before deload. I got 13 reps at 0 RIR, so I said, but it really wasn't 0 because I knew I had more reps in me, right? Sweet. You don't even need to try to go all out. Just remember your reps. deload, come back next time, put 120 pounds on the bar. Minimum 13, because you got 13 with 115 and 0 RIR. Now you got a deload, your fatigue is lower. Now that should be, again, 2 or 3, and then go up again. So one of two things will happen after 1 or 2 mesocycles, almost certainly never 3. One of two things. One, you'll either get infinitely strong forever, sweet, and you'll never hit failure. You're like Superman lifting weights. He like lifts 500 kilos, then 1,000, then the planet. He's like, right? Either that will happen, or eventually trying to match that baseline number of 13, which is what you set for yourself, or whatever you do next on your next reps. Let's say you hit 14 one week, now 14 is your minimum. You match that number of 13, you just keep going up in weight. Sooner or later, you will not be able to reach 13, no matter how fucking hard you try, and that will be failure. So the best way to find failure is to start at 3 RIR, set yourself a rep minimum that you get right there, your first guess of 12 or whatever it was. And then after that, you add a little bit of weight to the bar, or add reps, or both. And every time you get to a new level, that's your new baseline. And you push a little bit further each time, or at least match it. And as the training gets harder, because it has to, you're putting weight on the bar or you're adding reps, at some point you won't be able to do what you have before, and you will reach technical failure where you have to drop the weight on yourself. That's it. Problem solved. And I think a lot of people, they make the mistake of doing pure point-in-time RIR training, where they'll say, okay, today's goal is RIR 2. Last week's was RIR 3. I don't care what I did last week because I could be feeling a little different today. I could be more energy or less energy. I'm going to train to RIR 2 today. Last week they did RIR 3. It was, let's say, sets of 12 on average. This week, RIR 2, they felt like that's so great, so it sets a 9. What the fuck? You get 3 reps weaker, dropping 1 rep in reserve? That means you lost 2 reps to somewhere. No way. And I mean, maybe, but what if you're just lying to yourself, right? So that match or beat rep and weight system that I just described, that's the way to find out, am I really getting close to failure like I thought I was? So yes, auto-regulate, but I prefer to auto-regulate on volume as opposed to auto-regulate on relative intensity. So, or a rep number. I don't want to change the weight I'm doing. I don't want to change the reps week to week. I might do less volume if I'm not recovering, or take a deload. But if I'm recovering, I want the same rep goals, those minimum goals, and then we go closer and closer and closer until we either reach failure, and now we know, hey, this is great, or we get stronger forever, which is a sweet problem to have. So that's it. And that takes care of the problem. If people say, well, I don't know if I'm getting close enough to failure. Just set a minimum rep standard to yourself for the first week and keep going up in weight. You will find out sooner or later where your true failure point is. There's no other way around.
Yeah, I think, like one thing I've noticed too is when people ask that question and I say, are you tracking your RIR across all your sets every day of the week for multiple weeks? It's like, well, not always. It's like, well, then you don't know. Like if you're sitting there and actually judging every set and sitting there writing down, because I even know for me, like, for example, putting weight on the bar, doing sets of 8 with a 2 RIR, and then the next week not having a rep count, but saying I'm going to go to 1 RIR and I'm just going to do as many reps as I can to 1 RIR. Like that helps me gauge and be like, oh, I was just being a puss last week. Like I need to
totally
go heavier, and this is what that looks like.
Totally. And I think the best way to do that, in my view, is have those reps from last week. And when you reach them as a minimum, you really quickly real talk yourself like, okay, is this really 2 RIR, or do I have 2 or 3 more? Because I'll do that like every other week. I'll be like, last week I got 15 and it was really 2 RIR. And I'll get 15 this week with 5 pounds more. I'll be like, man, I'm trying to get 1 RIR now. I'm like, I'm not at 1 RIR. And I'll do 2 more reps and still be at 1 RIR on rack and be like, okay. So, and there's where that our regulation plays in too. Like sometimes you get more reps, sometimes you have fewer. But if you set your bottom end at, okay, there's no way either I get 12 or I'm failing, then you will for sure run into failure. What you don't want is to set a completely open parameters on our regulation. Like, well, if I feel like I'm 2 RIR, I'll just stop. It's so easy to talk yourself in to going way shy of failure, especially on systemically taxing compound heavy basics. Like almost every time I squat heavy or pull heavy or press heavy, like I look at the weights I'm supposed to do and I'm like, man, how the fuck did I do 10 reps last week? There's no way I'm supposed to be doing that. But like after you warm up and after you get in the zone and psychologically, you're like, I can do this because I just did last week. I have to go a little bit beyond. Fuck a 400 pound for 10 squat. I'm doing 405 today. You get under it and you get it done. If you just did RIR, it's so easy to be like, well, I guess I just got 6 reps today at 405. Like, yeah, but you could have squeezed one more out. And how do you know you weren't squeezing them out until you really, really tried? That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think your mind and your muscles have two different perceptions of RIR as well. Like, especially for squats, that's always the case with me. I always have to stop and ask myself, like, is it just my mind telling me I don't want to squat anymore, or is it like actually my quads are fatigued? And the answer is never
Totally.
my quads are fatigued yet, so I keep going. But um,
Right.
I think that's perfect. Okay, so we've kind of gone over what we're looking for in a rep. We've gone over what we're looking for in a set and multiple sets. Is the
Yep.
next step a full session?
Next one's a full session. And the way you can tell that is sort of two ways. Uh, well, there's a bit more detail here to flesh out in a longer talk, but um, the fundamental thing we're looking for is disruption of the target muscle. There's sort of two ends of a spectrum on how to do that. One is how weak and uncoordinated and crampy do the muscles feel sort of right after. And then another one is how much soreness occurs in the muscle in the hours or days after. And this isn't one of those that like has to be there, but if it is, that's a good thing. And it's not like the more the better, but if you have some, you know you're at least on the right track. If you have none, it's like a pass fail system in college, right? Like if you can fail it or you can pass it. And there's no such thing as more is better here. So here's what I mean. If you think you did a hard quad session and you hop, skip up and down the stairs afterwards, you didn't do a hard quad session. How the hell are your quads still functioning normally? Clearly did not exert themselves to any capacity that approaches their ceiling. So remember, the overload principle, almost by definition, is pushing to within your system's ability of max, like pushing close to the maximum. It doesn't mean more than the maximum. It just means in that rarefied air where you know adaptations are being signaled because your body doesn't get more jacked just moving around. So if you push your quadriceps too close to their limits for enough volume to grow, there's going to be a price to pay. They're going to be fucked up. And if they're not at all fucked up, you got some problems. You may be underdoing it and not doing enough. So if you can't walk normally, that's a pretty decent sign that you're at least doing enough. Now, could you be doing too much? Yes, totally. So that's for sure a thing. If you quads get sore, like they get delayed onset muscle soreness, did you understimulate them? For the love of God, almost certainly not. Could you have overstimulated them? Yes. That's a whole different talk for another day on fatigue and soreness being too much and competing with recovery of damage for actual adaptation. Totally. But if you're a person who has a problem stimulating your chest or a problem stimulating your quads, and all of a sudden something you've done gets you delayed onset muscle soreness, man, your problem is definitely not understimulating anymore. It may be overstimulating, which is a good problem to have if you've been struggling. It's like your problem is beginning lean enough, and now you're too lean. That's not really a problem. It's definitely a problem. Technically, you could poor health or just really out of energy, but it's certainly an easy problem to fix, right? Same way as like, oh man, my quads are getting too messed up from training. Like, great, just cut your sets in half and you're good to go, right? So disruption as sort of proxied by, here's another one, crampiness, right? Like if you trained your biceps with a new way that you haven't tried before, you sort of went into doing more sets. Let's say that was the problem, was you were understimulating volume wise, and like you try to brush your teeth later and your bicep cramps on you. Like you could say a lot of things about that workout, but that the biceps weren't sufficiently stimulated is probably not one of them. Does that mean that you need to go and get sore every time and you need to have your biceps cramp and you need to be able to not walk down the stairs with your quads? Absolutely not. Because in hypertrophy training, it's very easy to do too much. Too much of that, and now you've created so much muscle damage and disruption that your body spends most of its resources healing from that versus supplying hypertrophy. There's definitely a competitive thing there. It's been demonstrated in a few studies pretty well. So we're not saying this is like soreness is the path to growth, or you need to be able to like not be able to get out of bed and you successfully had a good chest workout. But what we're saying is if you're having trouble stimulating a muscle group and you never feel any of those things, you could probably do more in some capacity or changing your training approach somehow to get some of that stuff. So now we have, for each rep we do, we have a sensation of, are we doing a good job? For each set, we have a sensation. After multiple sets with the pump, we have a sensation of, are we doing a good job? Now, after workout, including right after, because you're like, if your pecs are really wobbly right after, you're like, yeah, for sure, I did a good job. And sometimes that can even tell us whether or not to keep going. So, for example, you don't know how many sets of chest you want to do today. You've done 3 sets, your chest isn't pumped at all, and it's not like weak, or it doesn't feel weird, and it's not crampy. you could probably do more safely and be just fine. After it gets a nice solid pump, you probably feel free to go. And if your chest is maximum peak pumped and it's now super crampy and it like feels super weird and you can't even reach over to like touch your own ear, if someone's like, dude, let's do more chest, you got to wonder if you're on the other side of that curve at that point and just causing more damage than necessary. Right? I think whatever it is you were going to get out of chest hypertrophy, you already got, right? Like, you checked that box, right? And if you heal fast, you can just do chest more frequently. It's definitely not enough training. So we're up to that time course. So not only is it like, can we check mark a workout as good, but we can actually use the system to figure out when our workout should be over, right? And people say like, well, what about like if I take a big deload and I'm really not used to training my chest, wouldn't my chest get pumped really quickly and get super sore? Like, yeah, which is exactly the technical thing is your MEV, matter of fact, volume drops after a period of detraining. So they expect that you don't need to do as much work for your chest to get it really big. Also, this explains something really cool, the difference between beginner and advanced rates of adaptation. For someone super advanced to grow their chest, how many sets do you think they need to get a real huge pump and get actually sore? Or like disruption, like actually like, oh my God, my chest is cramping. Fuck, 10 sets, 15 sets per session or something for really elite level guys. What about for someone who's a beginner? Dude, I know people who from one set, the first set ever of push-ups in their life, they will get chest cramps and their chest will get sore for 3 days. You'd be like, well, that's exactly what we would expect. Those beginners grow easy, and it's clearly evident from this framework that we have. So after that, that's the main one. And then over the weeks of training, if we're healing soreness on time or healing disruption on time, we're having great performances, like if we're basically able to perform at or above our normal level and increase volume slowly, we're doing a good job. And then the last one is after a mesocycle of training, you take a deload, you let the fatigue wash away. If you're getting stronger for reps in the next mesocycle, you're probably getting bigger. If you're not getting stronger for reps, you have some serious questions to ask. Now, to be honest, the most indicative one of those is the mesocycle scale one. If you feel nothing anywhere, but you're getting stronger for reps in the exercises that target the muscles, your muscles are probably getting bigger. Although there's an exception to that. If it's a compound muscle group, for example, someone could get stronger in the bench press and their pecs could get no bigger at all just because their front delts and triceps got bigger, right? So that's definitely like, we don't want to use just exercise to exercise. But if it's an isolation exercise, and especially if it's multiple exercises involving that muscle, like so your dumbbell press went up, your dumbbell fly went up, your cable fly went up, your chest machine press went up, and your barbell press went up, your pecs probably got bigger, right? So, and that's definitely the most solid indicator. But if you use all of these indicators, not only can they come together and give you a real good sensation of if you're growing muscle or not, because if they're all in the same line, like they're all green, and I was like, okay, everything's good. Yeah, that's good. If some of them are off, you can probably do a better job of training. And the best part is because some of them only take one rep of analysis to accomplish, and some of them take longer and longer and longer. At every stage of your training process, you can both know how much stimulus you're probably supplying and tool it and retool it and retool it to keep it high and make sure you're always doing a really, really good job.
Yeah, I like that. It kind of just gives in every scenario like essentially a gauge or a scale to like reassure you like you're doing the right thing or it's like going the right way. And I'm sure if the rep is in the right place, the session is in the right place, the sets are in the right place, like you can kind of know that by the end of the mesocycle, you're probably going to be in a good place. So like you said earlier, don't just wait for that end of mesocycle to like decide like, did that work? Like look at all these indicators to make sure you're going in the right direction, not wasting your time.
Right. And there's an easy example, just two extreme examples. You could say to someone, let's say, has their nutrition really, really good, and that they have the recovery really, really good, the supplements and so on and so forth. And they're complaining to you that their chest hasn't grown, even though they've wanted to bring up their chest. You can ask them like, okay, so have you been feeling tension like in the exercise you've been doing for low reps? Like, not really. I don't feel my chest much. Okay. What about for high reps? Do you feel a burn in your chest? Like, no, not really. Okay. Do you get pump in your chest? Like, no, not really. Like 10 sets later, I feel barely anything. Okay. Does your chest get really super tired, fatigued, and disrupted and sore after training? No, I never get sore. My chest always just keep going. And, have you gotten stronger over the, month or two that we've been training, especially after deloading and dropping fatigue? And they're like, no, my chest hasn't got any stronger. You got two problems potentially. One, their training sucks and can use a lot of improvement. Or two, they're just done growing. That's it. Right? Those are really the only two options, because clearly what they're doing on the recovery side, the sleep side, and so on and so forth is not the limiting factor. It's just like their training is awful. right? And even the genetic stuff is a really special case. They'd have to have some kind of really poor innervation in their chest, or really, really slow twitch fiber type that is just done growing. There's just nothing you can do, right? And or much more likely is you can improve the quality of their training by checking exercise execution, their exercise selection, volume management, so on and so forth. On the other hand, you can have an individual that is doing chest work, same idea, and they're feeling a ton of tension in every single rep. They are doing crazy metabolite stuff where their chest is burning off their body. They're getting crazy pumps, they're getting crazy disruption, plenty of soreness, but they're recovering from it between each workout, so it's not overlapping soreness. And they're getting, let's say stronger even over the mesos, which indicates at least neural adaptations are going. But their chest isn't physically getting bigger. You can almost 100% guarantee that it's a nutritional issue. They're just not gaining weight, or any kind of other sleep issue and so on and so forth. Although that probably impacts strength as well. Which is why the strength one is the best, because it picks up pretty much everything. But you can, at that point, you can either say, look, it's either genetics or something in your lifestyle. Because if someone told me like they were getting a stretch in the pump and everything, like everything was in line, what I just said for chest, and they asked me like, what do you think I could do better with my training? I'd be like, man, you got me, what would you say in that instance?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a hard one. It really is.
Yeah, like I does not appear it to me. Maybe there's some frequency stuff we could do, or maybe you're getting too sore, we could back off. But outside of little weird stuff like that, I just can't tell. Because people they also want growth secrets, right? And this goes back to the crowd earlier they mentioned of like, which way should I point my toes on the Smith machine so I can get the biggest outer quads? I ask those guys sometimes. I'm like, I don't know if the Smith is targeting my quads. I'm like, do your quads burn at high reps? Like, oh my God, they're on fire. Do they get sore? They're like, oh my God, crazy sore. Do they get tension? They're like, oh my God, it feels like they're breaking apart. I'm like, there's nothing I'm going to be able to tell you about Smith machine squats that's going to make any difference in your quad size. I think you're very much on the right track. Now, they say, how do I do Smith machine squats? And I'm like, well, do you feel your quads? They're like, not really, because my hips just hurt, but I don't really feel my quads. I feel my glutes a lot. Then, we have very obvious answer to where we're going to begin changing things so that they can get a good workout.
What do you say to people who, and I'm sure you've heard this, I don't get sore anymore because I'm an advanced. Yeah. Like, I just don't get sore anymore. And I always I once upon a time, I would just be like, oh, okay, shit. I mean, you're at that point. Yeah. But, I've been training for 9 years. I still get sore. You talk about soreness quite a bit. I'm pretty sure you have some experience in the gym yourself. So what is your thought process on that? Do you think people just they don't understand that RIR gauge that we talked about earlier properly?
Or just not doing enough volume.
Okay.
Yeah. Now there's different, you don't actually have to get DOMs to grow really well, especially if you train with higher frequencies. Your per session magnitudes could be so small that you don't get DOMs, but you certainly would have to be getting a palpable disruption every single time. Like your chest is fucked up after a session. And then, okay, you might not get DOMs, but that's just because the frequency. If you lowered your frequency, you would get DOMs. If you expanded your volume, you would get DOMs. So I think that people who say they don't get sore anymore, it can be for a good reason. But a lot of times if they haven't changed anything, except they just kept training the same way and they used to get sore, but they don't anymore, after a certain time of not getting sore, I would suspect that they're just undertraining the volume or effort or something like that. And a lot of times it is a combination of those factors. And a lot of times it's volume, right? As you get bigger, you probably need more of a stimulus to give the same sort of effect or a similar effect. So someone could say, let's say they do 5 sets of squats and that grew their quads and got them sore for months and years. And then after a while, it didn't get them sore anymore and didn't grow their quads much anymore. To me, that is an indicator that maybe, not for sure, maybe do 6 or 7 or 8 sets of squats. And can you imagine if they did 7 sets of squats? You're like, oh my God, I'm sore again. You're like, wow, what a fucking weird idea that you did more than your body was used to and you got some kind of effect, right? So we shouldn't necessarily, and I say this pretty often nowadays, we shouldn't be chasing soreness, but we should be aware of soreness. If a muscle we have is a really struggling muscle and doesn't grow much and we've never gotten it sore, I would go on a journey to try to get it sore, to see what you'd have to do to get it sore. So at the very least, if on your way to try to get it sore, if you grew a lot more during that time, like example, your side delts never get sore and they don't also grow. And you're like, I'm going to do 1 more set each week until they get fucking sore, or my performance drops, and you start adding sets. 3 months later, your average side delt volume per week went from 10 sets a week to 20 sets a week, and your side delts just look way bigger, and you still haven't been able to get sore. Maybe you'll never get sore, and that's okay, because mechanical differences and all the eccentric stuff. But look at this. You discovered that by pushing further and further, you were actually missing a whole shitload of gains. And it's actually been shown in at least one study that hard gainers typically respond better to increases in volume than decreases in volume. Because, those pros will say hard gainers are people who don't recover enough. Like, at a pro level, that might be true. At a very, very twig level, when you start out, if you're not growing, you may actually just need to do more. So people that never get sore, if their muscles are not on the larger end, or if they haven't been getting gains, and they're for a long time or ever, they have never gotten sore, it's worth an exploration of slowly, in a measured way, doing more, or playing with other exercises that maybe, again, stimulate the muscle with more tension, more metabolite accumulation. Maybe that way, think, okay, if I do enough volume of this, then I'll get sore. And it doesn't mean that once you've gotten sore, like, hey, I win, like, it could be too much, where you get sore once and you never get sore again, because, muscles, the repeated bout effect is a real thing. But if you've never even seen a muscle remotely sore, and it's something that has been struggling for you, there's a decent chance one of the many effective options, what's going on in reality, is that you've just never trained it hard enough. I'll put it to you this way. I used to think, this is easily my best example in my own life, I used to think that hamstring curls were not a good exercise for hamstrings, because I would do 3 sets of stiff-legged deadlifts or good mornings and get sore hamstrings. I would do 3 sets of leg curls, and I would never get sore hamstrings from leg curls. I was like, this is stupid. But what I realized was, it just wasn't doing enough volume. I started doing 4, 5, 6 sets of leg curls, and they got fucking sore. And I was like, oh, it's just an easier exercise, so I just have to do more of it, right? Like, so if someone says, yeah, I never get sore, but I don't care, soreness doesn't matter, and whatever volume they're doing in training, I almost want to be like, how do you know more volume would make you more jacked? I mean, the answer is probably don't.
Yeah. I think even general fatigue as a whole is probably a good indicator too. I know for me, like, Sunday is my rest day, Saturday is my second leg day. Like, when I come in the
Same
gym
here. It's
Saturday,
exactly what it is.
like, I really gotta get in the mode to do it, and then I'm excited for Sunday. Like, I don't like taking rest days because I love training, but by Sunday I'm really excited about rest day. And I think if you're not ever feeling that, I think you're probably not pushing it hard enough.
I would say that is a 99% true statement, about as close as it gets. I think there's a 1% of people who are just psychotic and addicted to training and
Yeah,
whatever.
very true.
But yeah, very, very rare. And that's not necessarily a good thing. It's probably a bad thing. But I think that that statement you just made could be framed on a wall. Like, if you never feel like a rest day, you're not training hard enough. That is almost certainly the case. In people's later years, when they're more advanced, I wouldn't even go so far as to say, if you never feel like, well, even in their intermediate days, if you never feel like a whole week away, you're not training hard enough. If you never feel like you need to deload. And when people are more advanced, if you never feel like an active rest phase, like several weeks away from hard training, you're not pushing it hard enough. The vast majority of pro bodybuilders, both natural and drug using, take 2 to 4 weeks almost completely off or off from training every single year. And I'll tell you what, it's not because they're not dedicated. It's not because they're lazy.
Yeah.
It's because they know how to push it so hard that they're elite. And because they push it that hard, it is not sustainable. So it's so funny too, because like Ronnie Coleman used to go on vacations after the Olympia season was over, and his only job was to lift weights if he wanted to, but probably not do a whole lot of that, and just eat high protein foods and eat whatever he wanted and just relax. So he'd lose weight. Like, can you imagine like doing a contest prep and then lose weight after the contest? It's like, what? Really? So lose muscle? Absolutely. But he would take like 1 to 3 months, I think, of that, and then he would restart his mass phase and then Olympia prep and so on and so forth. So can you imagine like he would like one thing he described was like he went on a cruise to go to like see like the Bahamas or Mexico or something. And he was on a cruise, and he said like him and the guy who wrote the article was like a friend of his, and like they went to the cruise weight room to just fuck around and just lift weights. Right? So first of all, can you imagine seeing Ronnie Coleman in a cruise weight room?
Yeah.
You'd just be like, what the fuck? Second, the heaviest dumbbells are like 80s. So what is he going to get out of that? Like something, right? It's just for fun and keeping the blood flowing. But can you imagine like being in the in the cruise and like looking at Ronnie Coleman and talking to him like a young kid, up and comer, like someone who was really hungry for muscle, and be like, hey, like, so are you training down here, like in the cruise weight room every day? And he'd be like, nah, just like once this week, and I'm just taking it easy. Could you imagine that kid thinking like, man, like Ron would be so much better if he trained every day when I was on his cruise? Be like, kid, like, do you really, it's like someone wins the Nobel Prize in science and they're having a champagne at the ceremony, and you're like, man, you know, you'd be a better scientist if you put that champagne down and went back to work. You'd be like, there's a balance to this. So like, I can tell you you're not a good scientist because you're not burnt out yet. So you got to get a little burnt out to know your heart. So same thing with bodybuilding. If every year you don't feel like 2 weeks off of training, you need to reevaluate how hard you're training.
Yeah, I like that. I think those are good examples too, because those are literally the elite of the elite. So if they're doing it, there's probably something to it. It's not coincidence.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, there at least might be, we might at least want to think about what they're doing and be like, maybe they have a point.
Yeah. Great. I think we can kind of wrap it up there. I want to respect your time. That was really good. I think we went over everything and then filtered in some questions in there that were really, really on point with the discussion and helpful to the listeners. Can you let everybody know where to find you, and if you have any content or anything you want to share?
Yes. So RP Plus is on the Renaissance Periodization website. You can find it by going on Instagram and going to RP Strength. Is an online resource of tons of videos and forums and all this other stuff. We have a series called Advanced Hypertrophy Concepts and Tools, where we go over all of this stuff in super intricate detail. There will be a total of 32 lectures, each one on every separate concept of hypertrophy and advanced hypertrophy training. So the folks in your podcast that really like in-depth conversations like this, for each one of those 32 topics is roughly 1 hour long lectures, 32 fucking hours of lecture. That's a university course, by the way, in advanced hypertrophy. And by the way, until July 1st, RP Plus is free. So give that a thought.
You know what's funny is because I'm a part of RP Plus and I highly recommend it. I've been staying up to date with those lectures actually. And I saw that it was like, your account is free. And I was like, oh, sweet.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was paying and you guys made it.
Yeah. There you go. Because as soon as the COVID-19 thing happened, we were like, man, everyone's stuck at home. We got to do something, because people are like, I'm stuck at home, might as well learn. And we're like, fuck it, RP Plus is free for 2 months. So there you go.
That's awesome that you guys did that. I highly recommend everybody listening to go check it out, because there is so much content on there. Is that lecture series, is that kind of not exactly the book you're going to come out with, but is that kind of like
right out of the book? Oh. Like, I made those lectures literally by looking at the rough draft of the book that we had just written.
Very cool.
Yes, huge. If you want a preview of the book, that's where to get it. So if there's stuff the lectures cover, which you're like, oh, I'd really like to just see more in depth and see that written down, that's what the book is going to be. Now, the book covers more than just those lectures, but those lectures are pulled. It's like the book is this huge theoretical framework of stuff and practical stuff. Hypertrophy Concepts and Tools is the practical stuff pulled out and explained how to do.
Okay. Yeah, I've been really excited about that book ever since I heard you mention it. Like, seems like a fucking year ago.
Fucking long time ago, yeah. But it's very much in the works. And by the end of the year, we promise the book will be out.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you again for your time, man. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on. I'll talk to you later.